fuel the little things. Okay, how many people would want to be sitting where you're at if the drywall didn't have any of these in? Or if the walls didn't have any of this in them? How many of you would trust the roof if it didn't have any of these holding it down? All little things. You know, Wednesday, I believe it was, Vonda was coming down here to help with setup here. And she got here and she said, something's going on with the van. And of course, the first thought in my mind was, praise the Lord. It wasn't. And I said, okay, well, I need to take something back to the cabin. We just have finished remodeling the cabin. And so took an end table back there that we had gotten off of Facebook. And on my way back, the check engine light started blinking. And I said, well, this is not a good thing. Shut it off. It stayed off. I said, well, that's better. Drove home, and right out here at the intersection, as I turned in, the entire alphabet came up on the screen. And I said, this is getting worse. And so Ben has a code reader, and so Thursday morning he pulled the codes, and cylinder 3 misfire. Do you know what was wrong? It was missing one of these. When he pulled the cover off, the engine cover off, and checked the coil, the nut was missing. And the coil was just there. A little thing made that van, unusable. You want to see an Anabaptist service get charismatic? Now, that mouse is just a little thing. Mice weigh on an average, or at least a general mouse you'll find in your house, weighs on an average about 0.4 of an ounce to the granddaddies at 1.1 ounces. Now, a 140-pound person is 4,000 times bigger than the half-ounce mouse. That's a big difference. And I thought of this because Vonda was talking to her sister, and they were having revivals. And they have an old church house. And all of a sudden, the lady in front of her gave a lurch and and she didn't know what was going on. And later discovered that up in the front of the church, the preacher couldn't see it, but there was a mouse walking along the front of kind of the raised platform. It was just wandering around up there, went in a hole and was looking out. And they were discussing afterward, and different of the ladies said they don't care if it revivals, they don't care if it's church. If that mouse would have came up through the benches, they would have been on the bench. It's just a little thing. Little things. You also see a picture. Okay, that is a picture of a heart muscle cells. Anybody want to guess how many cells are in the human body?
10 trillion.
Higher. How about on average, females average is around 28 trillion. And it can go up to For bigger people, up to 37 trillion cells in your body. Now, I know clean freaks, this is going to freak you out. Now we're talking about bacteria cells. On average, they say there's been between 30 to 39 trillion bacteria on every human being. If you could get $1 for every bacteria, you could pay off the national debt. Little things. Did you know that approximately 330 billion of your body cells die daily? You have, in about every 7 to 10 days, you have an entirely new body. Little things. Do you get the point of what I'm trying to say? Anyone, what is it? Little things matter. Did you know that one of the things that causes cancer, or should I say of cancer, is that a body cell, through a genetic mutation, turns off its kill switch. And because they don't die, then in a matter of very quickly, you overcome the good cells and dominate the body. Just a little thing. Luke 16, verse 10 says this: He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Here's a quote. Perfect happiness is a beautiful sunset, the giggle of a grandchild, the first snowfall. It's the little things that make me happy, that make happy moments, not the grand events. Joy comes in sips, not gulps. Quote from Brainy Quotes by Sharon Draper. You're seeing pictures of stories that are going to illustrate the importance of little things. And we'll get to that in examples, but we're going to look at 3 points in this topic. The first is, do little things matter? The second is love, and just 3 basic points with love as well. And then the third is faithfulness in the insignificant. So first point, do little things matter? Luke 16:10 would tell us, or we can draw from that, is that all great things are made up of little things. He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. All great things are made up of little things. And all you have to do is to get into science and study science, and you'll discover that. There is nothing big that exists that is not made up of little things. All great things are made up of little things. Secondly, little things are required in order for great things to happen. Luke 15 or 17 verses 5 and 6. And the apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. So the Lord said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, be pulled up by the roots and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Now, I wanted something more dramatic than a mulberry tree. So I picked a redwood. I don't think it changes what Jesus was saying at all. He was simply using something that was there. He said, this tree. Little things are required in order for great things to happen. What was the little thing that they were choking over, shall we say? It was the issue or subject of forgiveness. Now, notice I said it's a little thing, but it is not a little thing. We'll briefly consider paradoxes in rainy days, resilience tomorrow. But little things are required in order for great things to happen. A mustard seed, as pictured there, versus the chandler tree, the redwood in California. That opening in that tree is 6 feet wide, 81 inches tall. You can drive a small car through that opening. Jesus is saying a mustard seed can move something big. And not just move it, take it and have it cast into the ocean. And the comparison was faith the size of a mustard seed. Little things are required in order for great things to happen. Thirdly, little things create big problems. It's interesting when you start looking through history and at these little things. And I find it so interesting. What were the couple of little things that Joshua overlooked in the book of Joshua? And it plagued the Israelite nation their entire existence until they were deported from the land of Canaan. Moldy bread. Worn clothing. And they concluded their neighbors were from a distant country and signed a treaty with them and disobeyed what God had commanded them. Little things create big problems. Lastly, God notices little things. He who is faithful in little will be faithful in much. Mark 9, whoever gives a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, assuredly, I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. A cup of water in my name. A little act of kindness. But it's amazing, overlooking that little act of kindness produces a totally different result in Matthew 25 as well, where they're condemned because of failure to do the little things. God notices little things. Do you wonder why? Let's consider some examples. And these are real life examples. How many of you know why airplane windows are round? Anyone? Why are airplane windows round? Or they have rounded corners. Why is that?
Probably for structural integrity.
Yeah, for structural integrity. The first planes were the de Havilland Comets. They were built with square windows. In 1954 and 55, suddenly these planes, or 53 and 54, these planes started basically blowing up mid-flight. Structural failure, boom, it was over. And what they discovered was that a square corner creates a stress point. And that stress point of something in the air under the pressure of flying would in time cause cause a fracture to start at that point. And 3 planes disintegrated in midair in 53 and 54. And it was at that point they discovered that a rounded window takes the stress and keeps it going in a circle. And so now you have rounded windows in your airplane. Okay? Do little things matter? They do. How many of you have ever, when the U.S. dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, how many of you have heard that it's possible that a miscommunication played an important role in those events occurring? One word. The Japanese Prime Minister's response to the Potsdam Declaration, which was surrender or else, and established the terms of surrender for Japan, used the ambiguous word makasatsu, which can be translated as to ignore, to remain silent, or to hold back. U.S. interpreted that response as a rejection of the ultimatum, that rather than a request for further clarification. Now, scholars will debate it, but many have come to the place of where they believe that had the Japanese Prime Minister used a different word that could not be misinterpreted or been more clear, it is likely or possible that those bombs never would have been dropped. Obviously, there were other factors into it, but they're saying one thing that did happen was a distinct misunderstanding. It's possible. Did you know that it is possible? And testimony from a man by the name of Fred Fleet would indicate that there's a possibility the Titanic was sunk because of a key. That picture there you see of that key is supposedly that original key. Now, we don't know because it's hypothetical. But one of the things that Fred Fleet, who was the lookout on duty that night, said was that there was a crew change. And by accident, the mate that was assigned forgot to get the locker key for the binoculars in the lookout out of his pocket and give it to the appropriate person. Fred Fleet did not have access to those binoculars. No one could get those binoculars out of the locker on the lookout. And in his testimony before the Congress and Senate, he said he personally believes that had he had those binoculars, he would have been able to see the iceberg before he did and warned in time to avert the disaster. Now notice I said it is hypothetical, but what we do know is there was a pair of binoculars locked in the locker on the lookout that lookouts could not access because the key was in England. A little key. Little things matter. And I have become more and more convinced, and especially even in the area of purity and the moral issues we face today, that one of the foundations of overcoming moral sin rests in little things. And we'll touch on some of those little things today as we look at marriage and nurturing our marriage. Moving into just a quote. The happiness of most people is not ruined by great catastrophes or fatal errors, but by the repetition of slowly destructive little things. Little things that just accumulate and wear away. Just kind of wear. They're there constantly. A couple things on love. First off is a multitude of insignificant or little things hinder love. Song of Solomon 2:15 says, "Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines. For our vines have tender grapes. In other words, young grapes. They were vulnerable to being damaged. And notice he said it's little things that were threatening those vines. A multitude of insignificant or little things hinder love. One of the things we have to remember is relationships are fragile. A marriage relationship is fragile. Love in a relationship is easily damaged. Trust in a relationship is easily damaged and difficult to repair. Your marriage relationship is a treasure, but it's also fragile. A multitude of insignificant or little things will hinder love. Secondly, love covers a multitude of sin. How many of you have noticed the differences in the pictures? I'll go back. How many grains of sand do you think are in that picture? What's covering them? Love covers a multitude of sins. Love covers the unmet expectations, those character flaws, those traits that kind of grate, that I don't have, but my wife has. I'm joking. Unfortunately, that's too often the attitude we have, isn't it? Love covers a multitude of sins. Listen to Proverbs 10, verse 12. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. 1 Peter 4:8, and above all things have fervent love. In other words, he says, love. Have fervent, be into it, be passionate about it. For one another, okay, not for yourself, for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. Love is the only thing that makes it possible for two humans, whether Christian or unbelievers, to live together. We live in an age where we hear much about compatibility. And my response to that is, number one, get one thing straight. No one is compatible. No one is compatible. Two, in Christ we can be compatible. Love covers a multitude of sins. Love, as we love a person, as we focus on serving them, we can lay aside the things that we wish they were doing, but they're not. We can overlook those quirks that grate on our last nerve. In love, we can overlook those things. Thirdly, love is a choice. To love is a choice. We have to recognize it. And the choice has to do with who and what is loved. In other words, we love ourselves, but we have to choose to love. We have to choose to give a cup of water to someone. That was a choice. And that was an act of love as a believer. To love is a choice. Moving into the third point, faithfulness in the insignificant. There are two qualifications that I'm going to give with this, because what I'm going to share in nurturing in those little things can be misused. And so the first qualification that I'm giving you is the basic assumption is the advice is being given for a functional marriage. Okay, now that does not mean the marriage is not struggling. okay? But my assumption as I'm giving this has to do with a marriage that is functioning. Not perfect, it's functioning. It doesn't mean no struggles. Actually, to have a marriage without any struggles, I'm going to tell you, is not normal. And the first thing I would do is check to make sure everybody has a pulse. Struggle within a marriage is normal. This assumption is based on, and the advice is based on someone living in victory. Whether in their walk with the Lord, morally. Again, not perfect, but they are living in victory. They're overcoming. And that godliness is being lived. And that is the basis that I'm coming from. Secondly, there is something that does need to be qualified is this. We cannot demand these things. The emphasis of what is given is you doing it. Not me saying you do it. That is important. It's essential. The emphasis of what I'm telling you and going to be telling you has to do with I'm doing it with no strings attached. That is absolutely essential for a marriage to be able to function. Whenever we had the entitlement mentality, we're in trouble. We are in trouble. And our marriage is in trouble. We have to approach it with the reality of I am unworthy of my spouse's love, their trust, their respect, etc. It's a gift. I cannot demand it. Let's move into nurturing your marriage. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7 is where I would have pulled a lot of this out of. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Whew, I'm glad that's done. There's a list there. And did you ever take the time to break it apart as to what it actually means? We nurture our marriage by being totally committed to your spouse. What does total commitment mean? Do you see a person whose hands are chained together? See that picture? Total commitment means we don't do what we want to do. We do what God wants us to do. Whether I want to, feel like it, doesn't matter. Total commitment means that I'm saying, God, it's your way, not mine. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. Total commitment is an emptying of me and embracing God and what He says, what He calls me to do. Total commitment means I will love my spouse whether they respond to it or not. I will. The response is not an affirmative response is not necessary for me to keep doing it. I will do it. I will treat them as a person, not an object. I will value their feelings. Try to understand their feelings. Try to understand their likes, their dislikes. I'm totally committed. There is no other option. If, as a Christian, okay, let me ask you this question. How many of you profess to be a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ? Do you realize what raising your hand means? For you as a Christian to be consistent to your profession, you must do everything that God calls you to do, that you're aware of. For a husband, loving your wife is not optional. As a believer, when you have chosen to be a follower of Jesus Christ, you have made that decision to love your wife as well. And to love her as Christ loved you. That's commitment. Secondly, we nurture our marriage by persistently loving them, and that's referring to our spouse. Notice I said persistently. What does persistent mean? Test the wind, see which way it's blowing? Not today. Is that what persistent means? How many of you have encountered a persistent salesman? How many of you have had some very ungodly thoughts in relating to that salesman? I mean, kind of thoughts of wringing their neck, or, thoughts that a Christian shouldn't be entertaining. Persistence. Are you that persistent in loving your spouse? Persistence carries with it the idea of my love is focused on the person and not their performance. I love them for who they are, not what they can do. And I do it. And again, we have to remember, it's not perfectly, but we're trying. We're working hard at loving. And in persistently loving them, we do things they appreciate. Husbands, ask yourself the question, what are one or two things that I know my wife really appreciates? That means something to her. In case you can't think of any, maybe it could be something like a foot rub, back rub. The list could go on and on. Something you know that really means something to her. Maybe for some it could be flowers. To them, it carries significant meaning. Those are things we do if we are persistently loving them, if we're persistent in our pursuit of them. Nurture them with hope. How many people love to be around the eternal pessimist? It doesn't matter what it is, it's always, everyone has it better. And it's always, the end is near. It's like, I always remember what Ken Davis says. He said, you're around those people, and they say, we're just hanging in there till the Lord comes to take me home. And his prayer is, Lord, take them now. Yeah. We have hope. There is hope. God has given us promises about tomorrow. There's heaven. He has promised that He will give you the strength you need to obey. Husbands, to love your wife, He says, I'll give you the strength you need to do that. I'm with you. You see, hope provides purpose. It provides meaning. the last while, it's one nice thing about living almost a half an hour away is I have a half-hour drive to work and from work. And in the morning, it gives time to enjoy just kind of the world coming to life. And I find that to be so enjoyable. And I find it to be so encouraging. There's hope. Fourthly, we nurture a marriage with immediate forgiveness. When our spouse has done something that hurts us, I think it's very important to forgive immediately. When we forgive, it gives us the ability to begin to think logically about what happened. And in that, we can then analyze and sort through and perhaps come to realize, there's something I should have done here that I didn't do that contributed to it. And in that, we can then seek forgiveness from them. But we need to forgive immediately. And then from that basis of forgiveness, reach out to them and try to understand what is happening with them. And in that is when we may find what we have done. You see, forgiving releases the wrong to God, and in that releasing the wrong and the hurt to God, we find comfort and strength. Forgiveness or failing to forgive narrows the focus, and we can only see the offense that happened. It is impossible. I'm going to say it again. It is impossible to love someone you have not forgiven. Again, it is impossible to love someone you have not forgiven. Fifthly, you nurture your marriage by protecting your spouse. One of the things in protecting a spouse has to do with understanding their weaknesses. My wife, Vonda, does not have a GPS in her head. And a GPS in hand can be pretty bad. And for a variety of reasons. And I'm not saying this to make fun of her. All of us have something like that in some way or another. I just happen to be, as most men are, we know where we are. But no, the reality is some people are very good at sensing and knowing where they are. And especially earlier years, I could drive somewhere one time and drive back again without any directions. It didn't matter if it was in New York, I could do it. And somehow I could know if I'm here, if I do this, I'll get back to here. The reality is some people are gifted in that way. Other people are not. So one of the things that I have is Life 360, and that's not the only reason. But if she is somewhere and she says, "Hey, I'm getting confused. We're in a new community in cable, and learning a lot of how you go from here to there," I can pull up Life 360 and say, "Okay, here's where you are. Go so far, turn right on this road. Go so far, turn left here, and you'll be here," where she knows she is. Okay, that's knowing a weakness. And then adjusting accordingly to be there to be able to help her in the best that I can. And each of us have weaknesses. And it's important as a spouse to understand your partner's weakness and then adjust accordingly to protect them. And so we don't expect too much of them. We don't allow children to disrespect a spouse. We point them to what God calls them to. We also nurture a marriage by trusting our spouses. Men, how many of you have had your wife go shopping and you come home and you about fall over when you see the size of the grocery bill? How many of you have had that happen? I mean, it's kind of and you look out the window and you expect Walmart to be there. This is a lot of money. Did you buy the whole store? And there she stands with 4 bags. Trust your spouse. Trust them with the shopping. Obviously, there are times where, again, remember the qualifications. A functioning marriage, people who are living victorious Christian lives. That doesn't mean they're perfect, but they're doing well. Don't allow your imagination, fears, or personal struggles to sully their character. That is so important. We trust them based upon their character, not our struggle. I never forgot a situation involving my mom, and this went back years. There was a group of ladies, they called them the Three Musketeers. It was my mom and 2 other ladies there in the community, and they were always together. And the one wife, her husband, had some major issues. And somewhere along the line, and up until his death, he accused my dad of having an affair with his wife. Now, the interesting part of that man, there was questions about his moral character. I'm using that as an illustration to say, don't allow your imagination, fears, or personal struggles to sully the character of your spouse. Not that it does to them, but as how you view them. It's important to trust them. But it's also important to recognize that trust is something that is built and developed over time. It is the product or the fruit of faithfulness. Nurture your marriage by showing interest in your spouse. Is that man showing interest? Ladies, what would you say? Is he connected or present? You follow what I'm saying? Showing interest is more than just stopping what you're doing. Showing interest is stopping, in this instance, from reading the newspaper, stopping thinking about the newspaper, and focusing on what the other is saying and listening. Engaging what's between the ears to what is being said. We show interest in them by, how was your day? How are you today? How are you feeling? What are your plans? What are you planning for today? Just some questions. We show interest by actually asking about them. And the imagination is endless. Use it. You have one, hopefully. You show interest in them by showing affection. In the day of smartphones, there's many ways to show your husband or wife that you're thinking about them. Donna messaged me and said she's praying for me this morning. She knows that at midnight I was at Midvet with a dog. Anyway, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But just that thing of little things like that can carry meaning, especially within a context. Nurturing your marriage by hearing your spouse. I don't know how many times Vaughn has said to me, "You're not listening." Okay, I was looking, the paper was down, but anyway, I wasn't there. Hear them. Hearing means that we're engaged. We're hearing what they're saying. We're processing it, and we're not developing an answer. Hearing doesn't mean that I had the answer ready as she's talking, okay? Hearing means I'm listening to what is being said, and then when they're done, we then think about the answer. That's hearing. Hearing is listening to what is being said and then developing a response accordingly. It's mentally engaging with what is happening. We nurture our marriage with thankfulness. I'm going to put it just this way, okay? The older I get, the more I realize that a pillar of the gospel, a pillar that the gospel of Jesus Christ stands on, is thankfulness. The pillar that a marriage and a functioning marriage stands on, one of the pillars is gratitude, is thankfulness. Again, you cannot love something or someone that you're not thankful for. You can't. Your relationship cannot survive without you practicing and developing an attitude of gratitude. To be thankful for your spouse, for the many blessings you have. Every situation gives us an opportunity to be thankful for something. We bought a car a number of years ago, and in the first 6 months that I had that car, I spent $7,000 in repairs. Now again, the thought of thankfulness was not associated with that car. It took some time to sort through that one, okay? But there's a number of things within that situation I could be thankful for, okay? If I have a car repair bill, what does that mean?
You have a car.
That runs half the time. I mean, that's better than a quarter of the time, okay? Every situation presents an opportunity for us to cultivate thankfulness. And a marriage, especially in a marriage, gives us opportunity as well. It just depends what you're looking for. You know, how many of us, one of their favorite persons is their doctor? Okay, that's one of those necessary evils. But you know, if it wouldn't be for doctors, we would probably have between 7 to 10 less people sitting around our table. Now, when they're all there, it's 18 people. That includes in-laws, grandchildren. All those hospitalizations did bring with it a blessing. There's much to be thankful for. We nurture your marriage by always assuming the best, okay? I will not ask the ladies if this is a common picture. But if it is, how can you assume the best? You get what I'm saying. Love assumes the best. You know, love always looks at and says, okay, here's my first, okay, I have told him for the last 25 years to pick up his wash. It's very easy to take your shirt off and just in the clothes hamper, not beside it. Now, only about 6 inches difference. Okay? Assume the best. And that doesn't mean we don't confront a person, say, please, dear, I would really appreciate if you could move your shirt 6 inches. it would really mean a lot to me. And if he doesn't, it says, Lord, give me the grace. Give me grace. But don't we need that in our marriage? Assume the best, but ask God for grace as we serve one another. We honor them by speaking well of them publicly, by confronting them in private, and by submitting to their preferences as much as possible. We nurture our marriage by holding your expectations loosely. The reality is our expectations many times are not issues of right or wrong, they're preference. And we need to hold them with an open hand. We nurture a marriage with kindness and gentleness. You know, kindness and gentleness many times does not have so much to do with what is done as to how it is done. Think about that. Kindness and gentleness many times does not have so much to do with what is done as how it is done. The tone, just how it is presented, can take a good thing and add an edge to it. In closing, is it a new idea to think about there's a possibility that a tiny thing such as a key caused the sinking of the Titanic and the loss of 1,500 lives? Is that a new idea? It's actually possible. It could possibly be true. But the reality is, even though we don't know for certain, what we do know is that little things will sink the best, the biggest and best marriage that you have if we do not nurture it as God calls us to. So let's remember, little things are important. Little things do matter. Love is important. To overlook little things. And marriages are built and thrive when little things are done. God bless.